I think probably all families go through, but they probably just don't mention, certainly out in public.
They now have to pay for those damages and bear the repercussions of it. At their ages, £180 isn't insignificant to them at all.
The actions have consequences. Sometimes the consequences of the actions are positive, and sometimes they're negative.
Ian, I think it's fair to say initially when I started bringing processes into the company, you weren't that keen.
We're just going to have a series of robots effectively doing work. When I'm doing the technical role, the accounting, I can do it, but I've got to work so blimmin' hard to do it that it's draining.
I like to make sure there's no cracks there before we expand, so that those cracks can't get any bigger. For any company out there, that you can't always predict anything that could go wrong. You will get some issues that you didn't anticipate.
Hi there, and welcome to the Leaky Bucket Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Morgan, and this is the Financial Performance Podcast for entrepreneurs looking to get a better understanding of their numbers, to plug the leaks in their business, and to move from surviving to thriving. Hey everybody, and thank you for joining myself and Sam again for another episode of the Leaky Bucket Podcast. Right, Sam, first of all, we're going to dive straight into the leak of the week. And actually, the leak of the week is something that I think probably all families go through, but they probably just don't mention, certainly out in public anyway. Do you want to take us through a bit of the leak of the week?
Yeah, so we've been away for the last week on holiday. We hired 2 caravans and had full setup done, etc. So we arrived there and it was all fully set up for us. And one caravan was for us with the youngest 2 children. The other caravan was for the oldest 2 children. Unfortunately, whilst on the first night, there was a disagreement and a bit of pushing and shoving between the oldest 2, which resulted in a mirror being broken in the caravan. So this isn't the first time we've hired the caravans in this manner, and normally we've had no issues. So this is our first experience of something being damaged by the children. And it turns out that this mirror is an electric mirror, so it's reasonably expensive because all the electrics and everything have to be replaced for it, not just the fact that it's got like a 4-inch crack on it. So there's a cost involved, and we're putting that cost back to our children, which, as you can imagine, as teenagers, they are not particularly happy about because they feel they've apologised and it was unintentional, etc. But as parents, we believe they have to bear the responsibility, and therefore that's the cost implications of it as well. And at their ages, £180 isn't insignificant to them at all. So hopefully that will have the effect that they will think better about their actions in the future. But yeah, that's ultimately the thing behind it. We hired the caravans. There was some damage that occurred on the first night with them from a little bit of squabbling between them. And they now have to pay for those damages and bear the repercussions of it.
Yeah, and I think a great lesson here probably for business is very similar to parenting, in my view, in a way. And I think it's that the actions have consequences. Sometimes the consequences of the actions are positive and they're a great effect afterwards. Sometimes they're negative. And in this case, obviously, it was a negative one. But actually, if we don't put any consequences back onto them for their actions, then what's there to think that that's not acceptable behavior and they do it again in the future? And I think that's the same in business. Yeah, you're treating with customers, with suppliers, with staff, that actually if there's actions that cause a problem off the back of it, then there has to be consequences relating to those actions.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's how we learn in life, isn't it? And it's how we grow as people and how we change going forward. We need to be conscious of our decisions and understand that there's actions for those decisions that are taken. Even if they are in the height of the moment, there still may be consequences that come off the back of those.
Brilliant. Moving on, we've got the epic win of the week. Now, we sort of touched upon this on the last episode because we'd literally taken on a new hire on the one day, and then literally that was it. They'd gone through the training with them and gone on holiday. But I think what we want to do this time is sort of share a bit more of an insight into that, in terms of the testament is, Sam, probably to you. Yeah, no, not probably. Definitely towards you and your focus on having processes and systems and everything in place. So do you want to talk us through the epic win of the week?
Yeah, so the epic win of the week is, as Ian mentioned, is surrounding the processes we have in place. I'm a huge believer in processes. not least because I have a few memory issues. So processes are really what I run off and I fundamentally believe in. But also it means you can tell where something went wrong if you have a process to it. So process being created for every area of the company. And onboarding, which is this the role that this person's come into, has all the processes there for how we do things and how we want things to run. So that involves somebody going into those processes and marking off each stage. Over time, the stages become something that people know how to do it. So they don't necessarily have to go into everything and mark off, but they are used in order for us to sort of check and make sure things are being followed and there's nothing that needs to be changed, etc. But those processes have enabled us to have a full role documented on how things work and be able to step away and go on holiday very shortly after somebody joined us. Obviously, we've got people within the company that are still keeping an eye, and you do check-ins, and there are still bits in place for that. But fundamentally, the processes with any role within our company mean that somebody can look something up and be able to pretty much be able to run it as long as they've got some knowledge behind them and stuff. And that's the idea of it. And I think it works really smoothly across the company. I mean, there's a few tasks that I've had to leave for team members that normally they wouldn't do because they're bits that I would normally do, but I've done recordings and left processes within that. So they've been able to follow those step by step and complete those few bits for me whilst I was away. Ian, I think it's fair to say initially when I started bringing processes into the company, you weren't that keen. But I think that it's also fair to say that your opinion has changed significantly.
Yeah, I think originally my thing of processes was going to be like, oh, we're going to just take all the fun and everything out of it, and actually we're just going to have a series of robots effectively doing work. But actually the processes and systems are there as checkpoints. The processes are how to get certain outcomes. Now, some of those, there is only one way of doing it, and then it's this way and it's documented. Others, it's actually, this is the outcome you're working towards. This is a recommended route, but actually you can manipulate it slightly as long as you hit the certain checkpoints and the outcomes that are desired off the back of that. In this particular instance, the person who was coming in was taking the last technical role that I had within the company. And I think for me, it was quite evident to go, one, I felt confident in terms of the whole process was documented and the whole role was documented, but also that I could go through there's a checkpoint effectively for each client that's within that onboarding phase. And it just took one day of going through and understanding the process and the systems. I didn't need to go through every single client. I was able to leave some guidance, some instructions, and I've come back and had a check-in, and basically they've been able to go, yeah, everything was great. When I got stuck, I was able to move on and go to another client and so on. And they were able to get help from other people, but there was no real learning or training that was needed off the back of one day to be able to do pretty much a whole role. So yeah, I think if you'd asked me if that was possible 2-3 years ago before we had those processes, no, I would have delayed hiring that person, or I would have argued to delay hiring that person, because I don't think it would have been possible to take somebody on and train them in a day to be able to follow processes to do a role.
Yeah, I think obviously the processes are really good. Obviously, I think they're amazing, but the processes are really good. But we have hired somebody that has extensive knowledge as well. So the knowledge of being able to do everything is there. It's just the process to the way we like the steps to follow through, or how to document things in terms of how MBS does it. So the knowledge of being able to do the role and complete the work is already there, and that was fundamentally tested, which we've discussed before on the podcast, how we make sure that somebody has the knowledge that we require, and it's not just something they're putting down on paper and that actually they can't actually manage to do that role. We test it in multiple different methods when we're hiring. But yeah, the processes certainly mean that person can hit the floor running, and they know their expectations. They don't have to reach out to us like constantly all the time because it's there for them. But also we reassure the person that if there is anything they come across that they don't feel works properly within that process or could be improved, etc., definitely let us know. We're always keen on improvements for our processes, and if they feel there is a better or smoother way, then 100% we encourage them to reach out to us so that they can be improved upon.
Brilliant. Should we move on?
Yep. So we're going to move on to the pick of the week. And this is a book that you've recently been reading that you wanted to share with the audience.
Yeah, so over the last sort of 6 months or so, where I've been very much drawn back into a technical role, I've not done as much reading and listening to books and things. But this was a bit of an introduction to a potential new coaching / mastermind that I was looking at doing. And this was one of the books by the guy who runs that, so a guy called Dan Sullivan. And the book is called 10 Times is Easier Than 2 Times. And generally the concept was that as human beings, we like to solve problems. But if the problem we're constantly looking to solve is how do you double a business in terms of how do you double the number of people, how do you double the revenues, how do you double the profits, whatever, the challenge of doing that just means, well, actually, we probably just do more of the same. Yeah, so let's just take what we do and let's do twice as much. And you sort of go, okay, that might be a bit of a squeeze, but actually with the right hires in the right places, we can probably make that happen. But his argument was to go, actually, it's no more difficult for our brains to consider the concept of to go, but what if you did 10 times the amount? And the advantage of that being, actually, if you're going to do 10 times the amount, what you can't do is 10 times of what you're already doing. Because you can't switch from what you're doing today and do 10 times of it tomorrow. It's not possible. It's too difficult and too challenging. So therefore, our brains kick in to go, well, okay, well, we can't do that. And his theory is, well, what you should be doing then is take the top 20% of what you do, the most profitable, the most efficient, and do more of that. And it just sparked another element into me to go, okay, what is our top 20%? What could we be doing more of? And I think it's a very clear and concise book with some good actionable points of it. And that's certainly something I look for in a book is what can you take away in action rather than it's just a book for a book's sake.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned before that I'm not as much of a reader as you are and stuff, but you've been sharing information from the book with me, and it's certainly there's certainly major aspects of it that make sense. I think growing is stressful and time consuming, and it absorbs money, significant amounts when you're going through that process within a company. So I think sometimes if you're going to go for it, well, why not go big in one go rather than putting yourself through an extended long period of growing but on marginal rates.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think it sparked another, I tend to be that one who challenges and brings the ideas and wants to move things forward, and you're usually frustrated and says, going, let's get control, which we spent a long time doing this year. But yeah, this was a spark to go, yeah, I think I've got something that can push us forward. So yeah, watch this space.
Yeah, I think the balance that we sort of struggle with, if you like, it's not really a struggle, but the balance that we discuss and work through is the fact that I like stability and control within things, and I like growth, and I definitely think there should be periods of growth, but I do like to make sure everything's stable within that. And I think you're more of a sort of probably go-getter in terms of those bits, and you're like, yeah, but we can stabilize as we're doing this bit, and let's just go for this, let's just go for that sort of thing. Whereas I like to make sure there's no cracks there before we expand, so that those cracks can't get any bigger.
Yeah, I think the reality is either one of us running a business on our own without somebody playing that other role would probably struggle. Like if we take your aspect of what you do, that actually go, there's always cracks to fix. Yes, you'd spend all the time fixing things that we don't necessarily then move forward ahead of inflation, let's call it, yeah? Whereas if my thing, it would be, I push so far for growth that all these cracks are appearing and I'm just like, yeah, whatever, and things all fall apart. So it definitely needs both. And it's learning and understanding, we get better at it as time goes on, to go, actually, what's more important this time? And I think we've come through now a good 6, 7, 8 month period of stabilization and crack fixing, as you would put it. And now it's me sort of getting hungry again to go, come on, it's time to go. But I've learned more now to go, I've got to find something that's the real right thing to go for, because I need to be able to sell it to you, because you need to be on board and go, right, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we sort of doubled our turnover, didn't we? And then went into a period of some cracks that appeared. We had some issues staffing wise and stuff that we hadn't anticipated happening. So it just all sort of come together. So I think you're right, that sort of 6 to 8 month period of sorting those issues, which in my opinion is bound to happen when you've had significant growth. You will get some issues that you didn't anticipate. We sit down and we chat through what issues we could have off the back of things. But I think it's fair to say, probably for any company out there, that you can't always predict anything that could go wrong. And actually, if you sat going through anything that could go wrong, would you actually get on with anything at any point? So yeah, we had this period of significant growth. off the back of that, we did have some cracks that appeared that we spent a period of time fixing. Now we're back into that sort of growth stage. Yeah, but maybe keeping a bit more eye on the staff side of it this time, because I think we kept a lookout on all other aspects, but I think there was a little bit of a slip on that sort of staffing area for new team members at the time.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be watch this space in future episodes and see how things are going as we go through that next stage of our growth and development. So moving on, Sam, we're the buzz of the week, and this is something, because I don't really do the news, tends to be somewhere that you feel a bit more comfortable with. But yeah, do you want to give us a bit of an insight as to what's been going on?
Yeah, so we discussed previously the fact that we like to go abroad, and we normally go abroad a few times a year, and this time we were actually doing this camping holiday, one because it was for around our son's birthday and he doesn't tend to like to go abroad, but secondly because it was a sort of cheaper, last minute sort of easier holiday to sort. And actually I'd been moaning a little bit to anybody that had listened, really. No, I've been having a little bit of a thing that I'd prefer to be going abroad. It's been a long time since we've been away. We did go away in sort of February, but that was to Iceland, so it was cold, not quite the same. I like the sun. So I'd been having this little bit of a moan about going abroad, and then actually, ironically, whilst we were away on holiday in the caravan, it shows up on the news, or I hear about anyway, an issue with aeroplanes not being able to fly, etc. I'm not 100% sure of what the issue was, something to do with a tower and receiving signal of planes or something. But anyway, the fundamental fact of it is that actually I'd been having this little bit of a moan, but ultimately what had happened in the end, that had we have had that flight to go away, we would have been within that same period that we would have flown for. So therefore we would have been involved in all that chaos. And actually sometimes, yes, you might not be getting exactly what you want, but be grateful of what you are having. We were having a holiday away, and actually we had beautiful sunshine. We had 30 degrees pretty much the entire time we were there. I think we had about 2 hours of rain on one day. Other than that, we were 30 degrees the entire week we were away in the UK. So yeah, I suppose the thing behind that is to just remember that you might not always be getting exactly what you want, but it's better than nothing, and you could be getting something worse. We could have just been stuck in the airport for hours and hours.
Yeah, I've not got a great deal to add. I think you've summed it up brilliantly. But what it does do is lead really nicely into the peek behind the curtains, which is our time away going camping. I think there's probably a bit of a downplay in terms of, we stayed within the UK, but I certainly don't believe we view it like that. I'd probably say that we, as sort of the parents in our family, we probably prefer going abroad. Children, I'm not necessarily so sure. It's more of an action-packed holiday when we do the camping element. You know, they do skiing and mountain biking, and there's still time at the beach and so on. Whereas we don't tend to do as much of that when we go abroad. So I'd probably argue that I don't know if they prefer it, but they certainly like the elements of that. But anyway, we've spent the last week or so camping within the UK, as you say, enjoying the wonderful weather. Have you got any thoughts or anything to add?
Yeah, so I think the difference for me is, for some reason, when I get on a flight and go away, I mean, to be honest, I could probably fly to Scotland and feel the same. It certainly did when we went to Belfast. So, you know, there is that degree of it feeling the same. But when I get on a flight and go away, it feels like I'm going on holiday. It feels like we're away from the company. Yes, the team could contact us if they needed us, but that never happens. I think we've had 2 occasions in all the years we've had team members where they've felt they needed to reach out to us, and that was years and years ago. So I think it's highly unlikely to happen. So when we go abroad, we tend to read business books, things like that, but we're not actually doing any business work. So there's development there because we're reading the business books, but on the whole, it's relaxing and it is pretty much chill time. We do go and do activities and things, but it feels far more relaxing, and you're pretty much guaranteed to have good weather. I think part of the thing with the UK for me is I feel like, am I going to spend out quite a lot of money not to get the weather? it doesn't feel as relaxing. And actually, for some reason, when I have a UK holiday, I still feel that need to check my emails for work. I still feel the need to have a look at the Slack channels, see if the team have messaged anything. I don't feel that break away from work as much for some reason. And that's on my part, not on the team members' part, because, they don't drop me a message or anything going, I need you to do XYZ. It's no different to being abroad, but I don't feel like I'm away. From a children's point of view, yeah, I think it's a mix. Obviously, our son doesn't like going abroad, particularly maybe 2 or 3 days, but he certainly doesn't like a week-long holiday abroad. But the holidays in the UK tend to be more action-packed, and maybe that's the reason for it. We do tend to go to places that have dry ski slopes, things like that, toboggan runs, the beaches there. They've got thousands of acres of bike riding, horse riding on site. So there's lots and lots for them to do. But I think on me, I've still got all the cooking, the cleaning to do because we're in a caravan and bits. Whereas when we go abroad, we tend to go all inclusive. Everything's done for me. So I think a mix of those two aspects don't quite feel the same. However, this time going away, we decided we weren't going to cook any meals, and we actually had every single evening a meal out or went and purchased food to bring back. So there was a lot more limited cooking. It was just breakfast and snacky bits at lunch sort of thing. So yeah, it did feel a lot easier in terms of that. What do you think? What's it like for you?
Yeah, I think it's the same. I've got some thoughts to share with it, but I think I'm going to keep that back, my power move, because I think that's where it's going to come in. But overall, yeah, I think in terms of, I still have that little inclination like you did. I'm in the UK, like I should be, not necessarily I should be working, but I still feel that inclination, I should check some emails and do that. That doesn't happen when I'm away. But I was quite disciplined in that respect, just going, hang on, no, I don't need to. The team have got this. Somebody's monitoring my emails and doing that. So,
do you think that comes in from the fact that we do go to bits in the UK? So obviously we go to London for events, we're in Birmingham for different bits, etc. So there is a fair amount of travelling around for different things that we attend to, meetings, etc. We're not just solely based in the office, and therefore there is travelling around to different bits to do with the business. So therefore, do you think almost that travelling aspect doesn't give us the feeling in our head that no, we're away, we need to not do those bits because we're used to moving around the UK and still doing business?
Yeah, I'm not so sure, but potentially. There's certainly something in it because it doesn't happen when we go abroad. I didn't feel like it in Belfast, even though when we went away, I knew I had that hour slot put aside.
I had to remind you actually while we're away, which is unusual. But yeah, I had to remind you, didn't I? And go, don't forget you've got that meeting in a bit. We need to make sure we're somewhere for it. And you were like, oh yeah, which is highly unusual for you.
Yeah, I think it was, it felt different. And obviously Belfast's still part of the UK. So
it's something about going to the airport, definitely. I feel like when we're at the airport, that's the start of our holiday. And yeah, it just has a different feel to it.
Yeah, I was trying to think if it felt different when we went to Disneyland for a few days and we went on the Eurotunnel.
I wouldn't know. I slept for most of it. It's a sleeping journey.
Yeah, it sounds about right. So, power move of the week. Let's move on. I've certainly got an inclination, but Sam, I'm interested, first of all, from everything we've gone through, what do you think the power move of the last week has been for you?
The power move for me has definitely got to be the process that we've put in place. I mean, I'm the forefront behind those processes, and it is nice to see that side that you've recognised over the years, how important they are and how much they improve the company, and how I think most importantly, probably how they take stress off us and other team members, because actually had they have not been in place, it wouldn't have just been you and me that was stressed this week. It would have been the other team members, because they're having to jump in and teach and train and spend significant amount of time out of their role helping in another role, which just hasn't needed to be the case with all the processes in place.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm going to go somewhat different from my power move, which is having the break. For the first few days, I don't know if you call it ill. I was suffering with some kind of stomach pain and issue, which was certainly, I wasn't feeling up at the top of my game. And then when we got through that, actually, I felt like that. I don't know if I felt anything necessarily in the moment, but certainly as I've come back and I'm at work, I feel refreshed. I feel like, right, I've got energy. I'm ready to go again. it was a good divide between the last 6 months of working technically and now going, right, now I'm back onto business development and growth. Still got a little bit of a technical aspect to my role, but I've now sort of divided up my days much better. And I felt like I've got a new energy, and I almost felt like a little bit of a different person coming back. So it only needs that short period of time for me. And as I ended up going, I don't know maybe why we don't schedule in. You're going to say take me up on this as well. So I hesitate as I commit into this. But I go, why don't we schedule in like a week's break every quarter? So actually within 4 times a year, we've got a break that's in place.
You know why we don't schedule anything? Because you won't stick to it. Unless it's specifically going away. We booked somewhere to go away. You won't stick to that. We'd have to book a holiday abroad for you to stick to it.
Yeah, but maybe that's what we should do.
Yeah, so Ian's saying about how refreshed he felt, and he had said something, and certainly there's a bit of a difference. I mean, we've had a bit of joke within that house that he was a bit of an arsehole in the period leading up to going away because he was stressed with work and stuff. And he's come back like a completely different person. But realistically, he wasn't being an arsehole. Although we joke about that within the house, he was just stressed with work and different bits going on. And, is it going to work okay with the bits of new people coming in? Even though you've done all the tests with them, there's still that little bit of a doubt that you put on yourself over it of have you done enough to check this person's right?
I think for me, right, when I'm doing the technical role, the accounting, I can do it, but I've got to work so blimmin' hard to do it that it's draining. It's like energy sapping. And then it's hard to focus. After, for me, 6 months of doing that is really hard work. And then I get to the point of going, I'm distracted and I'm doing this little bit and that little bit. And then the hours go on because I'm like, I didn't get done what I needed to get done. Whereas actually last week, it was only 3 days, but actually I was able to be quite disciplined with that, even though I came back to a little bit of like, all this stuff has happened while you're away. Can you just check up on these few bits? Yeah. So, but certainly for me, I do feel re-energized, but maybe we should look at once a quarter. We have something.
Yeah, you can definitely see the difference in you. And definitely in your character, you're far more happier coming back. I mean, the other day we had all the family round and stuff, but actually had I have said to you a couple of weeks ago about having all the family round at the weekend, that just would have been highly stressful for you because you'd be like, got a really busy week with stuff going on and now you want to invite loads of people around, which isn't necessarily your forte anyway, having groups of people round sort of thing, but actually you were well up for it, had a really good time and things, and you can definitely see the difference it makes. So I mean, I'm definitely up for having a holiday every 3 months. That works for me.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Leaky Bucket Podcast. I'd love it if you could help spread the message by clicking subscribe and leaving a review. Also, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can also find more info and links in the show notes below. See you next time.